Hello, everyone. My name is Alexander Lucard, and I am an HMIS administrator for Montgomery County. In today's training, we're going to look at what you can do to do some pre-cleanup for point in time, and also what you can do once point in time actually rolls around. Point in time this year is January 25th, 2023. And I know that some people end up struggling because they have to get all this information in on their clients the night of point in time or immediately after. But the truth of the matter is you can be proactive and get a lot of the cleanup done ahead of time. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at this test client here, Test Testerson. And we've already prepared some entries for the different program types that we're going to talk about today. We've got street outreach and path here. We've got our emergency shelters / hotels, motels, and diversion. And we've got our formerly homeless clients, which is our permanent housing, our permanent supportive housing, and our rapid rehousing programs. And we're going to look at what we can do to clean up ahead of time. In all these cases, we're going to say that the client came in on December 1st, 2022, and we're going to show you what each of these programs has specifically that they can do to clean up. And afterwards, we're going to talk about what all the programs can do combined to make sure that their data quality is good, both pre and post point in time. So let's start with Test Testerson, and let's start with that street outreach and path. Now, street outreach and path are going to have the hardest time having some pre-cleanup, being proactive like we talked about. And that's because you don't know what clients you're going to encounter on point in time, right? Because when you're dealing with the unsheltered population, you might know where there is, a local group that hangs out unsheltered, right? Or you might know where a specific client usually is most nights. But point in time is that specific night. And when you do your street outreach, the client might not be there that night. Or there might be a completely different person or a group of people there than you usually deal with because it might be a different time of night, or it might just be because they know it's point in time and they don't want to deal with you, right? Things like that can happen. Dealing with street outreach is a little more of a shoot than it would be for a permanent housing client where you know that client has been there for 5 years and isn't going anywhere for quite some time. But there's still some things that you can do to clean up. And that involves going into your client's entry, right? Going, hey, look, 12/1/2022. And we go into that entry and we just double check to make sure that everything looks right as of when the client entered. And that means looking for no null values. Something like secondary race can be blank because a person might not identify as multiracial. But we want to go through and see if there's anything blank. And if there is, we want to clean it up because we don't want to have any null values. So in this case, oh, look, number and household is missing. 1, because we're talking about a specific individual. And then we can say, oh, last known address was Rockville. Right, so we're filling in these questions. And again, this is not a real person. This is not actual personal identifiable information. We would not do a training like this with a live client that we'd be putting on YouTube. But we're just looking at all this information. And we're going to say, yes, everything looks right as of when they came into the program. If it looks right, oh, look, we're missing the Medicaid number, right? So we'll do. And once we have all those blanks filled in, we're going to hit save. Or we can hit save next. Right? And that means everything now is filled in that's true as of when the client came into the program. So that's good. We've got that cleaned up. But what do we do then if the client has information that's changed? Today is 12/20. So let's say that something has changed between 12/1 and 12/22. We want to make sure we have the most active and correct information in for the client before point in time, right? So we go in here and we go to entry exit, and we're going to do an interim for 12/20. And we just double check, make sure everything looks correct, right? Because even though it's only been 3 weeks, things can change. Right? We can see all the little bits we've entered. So let's say something changed, and we now have a new contact information. And we're just going to put that in. We're going to put next to kin. We'll do Tessa Testerson. We're just filling out. There we go. We've got that client information. And that's a change because we just got the information today and talking with him. He talked about his daughter. We asked, oh, can we get that information in case anything happened to you? And that's why we did the interim. And then you'll also notice that in any interim, we have 3 questions, COG point in time questions. Do you have trouble reading and writing English? Were you ever in foster care? Have you ever served in active duty in the U.S. Armed Forces? Now, it's not point in time yet, but that doesn't mean you can't ask these questions ahead of time, right? Because these questions are probably going to be the same when they do point in time. So if you want to ask them now, when you see the client, it's perfectly fine. Otherwise, you can wait until point in time and try and get those answers then. Let's say in this case, the client, you didn't ask them these questions yet. You're saving it till point in time. Totally fine. But again, these are 3 questions that only come up during point in time because COG, the Council of Government, asks it. We're going to hit save and exit. And there we go. We've made sure that all the client's information that is true at entry is cleaned up. We've made sure that all their most recent information is cleaned up too, because we've done an interim. And now a month later, it's point in time, right? And let's say we got those COG questions. We're going to do an interim, and we're only going to do an interim if we're updating information. We're only going to do an interim for point in time if we actually have new information. If nothing's changed, then what's the point of doing an interim, right? We're only doing an interim when something changes. We don't need to do an interim just for the sake of doing an interim. That's just silly, because if all the information is the same, and nothing has changed, when we run reports, it will be grabbed as an exit object or date effective based on what type of report it is. So don't bother doing an interim unless something has actually changed on point in time when you do your survey with them and you notice the information in HMIS does not match what they gave on point in time. So we do save and continue. And we're going to say, right, we got the answers to the COG question. And that's the only thing that's changed. Everything else is still the same. Nothing's changed in the past month. We hit save and exit, and we're good to go for point in time. Everything is answered. Right? Perfect. And that's all street outreach really has to do for point in time cleanup. We just check that entry. We do an interim. If there's anything that has changed recently, you should have interims regardless. Remember, we've done lots of interim trainings, lots of update trainings, annual assessment trainings. So there's a good chance that your clients already have interims in there. And then if anything has changed between the entry or the most recent interim information and the point in time survey that they fill out, you're going to do that interim for the data point in time, and you're going to make those changes. That's all you have for street outreach. Now let's move on to shelters, diversion, and hotels. All right. So this is a new program that's going to be starting in 2023. That's the reason I'm using it as a test program, because there are no clients in it. So get ready for our medical respite program in 2023. So what do? We're going to do something pretty similar, right? We check that start date, and we make sure that all that information is correct. We go through, make sure all the information looks correct, just like we did with street outreach. If it all looks good, we're good. If anything is missing, we're going to fill it in for what was true as of the date of entry, not today's date, the date of entry. So if we notice that, say, source of income was missing, and we go, oh, whoops, he's got that SSI. Let's put it in, right? We want to make sure that everything looks correct as of when they self-identified entering the program way back on 12/1. Again, if something has changed between the entry and the day you're doing the check, do an interim, update that information if there isn't an interim already that covers that. And then we would do an interim for point in time as well when point in time happens, right? Exact same flow that you would do for street outreach or path. But there's one last little thing you want to check that shelters, those diversion beds, right, and the hotels have that the others don't. And that's, of course, shelter point. So we're going to go in, right? We're going to do our medical respite bed because that's the program we're using as this test. And we're going to do view all. And then we're just going to check and see, oh, hey, are the clients in the right bed? Do we have the right clients in here? And in this case, we've only got one because this is a brand new program. It isn't being used in real life yet. So of course, Test Testerson, the test client, is the only one in here. But we check and go, yep, Test is supposed to be in bed 1 female. But then we would go, oh, wait, no, Test is a male. Why is he in one of the female beds? So we could click on his name. And we could make a change. We're going to assign the unit. And we're going to move him over to male beds. Because if you remember in his information, he identifies as a male. Save and exit. Right. Takes a little bit to reload. And now we've got him in the right bed. We've got him in a male bed rather than a female bed. So we just want to double check and make sure that our shelter point, again, shelter point is only for clients that are actually in emergency shelters, our hotels, right? Or our diversions, which uses those hotel beds as well. So we would have you guys check your shelter point, make sure that you have the right clients in there. Make sure that you have clients in the right program. So if a client where the household has minor children would not be in a program that does not take minor children like this one. So if we had a family with 3 little kids, they shouldn't be in this medical respite program because this is a household without minor children program, and children should be in a household with minor children. All right. We'd also look to make sure that if you do have a household set up, that the members have a group ID that is the same. That group ID, right, would be for the family members to say that they were entered in together as a family. So let's do that as an example, right? Let's say that we're getting ready for point in time, and we just noticed, oh, the Jetsons are missing from our shelter. We haven't put them in yet. We want to get them in because I know they're going to be in there for point in time. Let's get them in. We're going to do a check-in. And we're just going to do 2 Jetsons, right? Oh, but there are no Jetsons in the live site. So we're just going to grab just test. All right. And we know just test is a female. So we're going to put her in a female bed rather than the male one it defaulted to. And we're going to put in fam. And we'll say that he's got a male bed. And it's 12:20, but oh, they actually came in on 12:15. So we're going to update the date there. And because we're checking them in together, because they are a household together, a household without minor children together, scroll down, make sure all that information is correct, right? We're going to just say that it is for the process of speed. Save and exit. And then we can see here that we've just entered in the tests. One's in a female bed. One is in a male bed. And they have that group ID together. Oh, but look. Turns out that this test is a female, so let's move her to a female bed. Because we want accuracy. But as you can see, when we try to go fix the other family member, this is what we talked about. We see that there are questions that aren't answered. And why? Because a lot of times, people forget to do the rest of the family. They do the head of the household, but they forget to fill out the rest of the information for the family. So in this case, we go, oops, we forgot to finish all the stuff on this kid. Why don't we get this in? And that's what you're going to have to do now. So look at all this. Nothing was done. And again, this happens a lot. People are great at getting the information on the head of the household, but sometimes not so great at getting in the information for the kids or the spouse or whoever else is in the family. Now that we've done our cleanup, and we can see that they have a matching group ID. So if you have a family member, let's pretend Tess Testerson is with both tests. We see these two have a group ID and Tess Testerson does not, which means that we did not enter him correctly. We enter the rest of the group together, but if not Test. So this is important. Always make sure that your family members have a group ID on your shelter point, which means that they are linked together. Even in a household without minor children, right? I know that this one is a minor, but we're just using this as an example. Minor or not minor, they need to have a group ID when they are entered together because that means the system is linking them together. Otherwise, and this is especially true for a minor, if FAM test 11 did not have a group ID, that means that she would be in the program by herself and she would be an unaccompanied minor, and we'd have to raise red flags because we don't want a 2-year-old running around a program by herself without any adult supervision. But that's all you do. You double check your shelter point in addition to everything else and make sure that your shelter point is up to date. Remember, you want to be doing shelter point as close to real time as possible. And remember that your shelter point entries are conjoined with your entry exit entries. So we want to make sure that all this information is in as close to real time as possible, right? Which means no more than 72-hour delay between when they actually came into your shelter and when they're added to shelter point, which will generate their program entry, right? And just a reminder that because we did just do that, right? All right. Because we entered them in shelter point, it automatically creates their entry for them. Just a reminder on that is a unique thing for our shelter, hotel, and diversion programs. You do the shelter point entry, and it will create an entry exit entry for them automatically based on that shelter point entry. So you don't have to double up. You don't have to create an entry here because that'll give them 2 entries into the program with only 1 connected to shelter point. Do shelter point first, and bing, it's going to move them here, automatically create that entry exit for them. I know that this is preaching to the choir. It's stuff you guys already know, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention here, just in case this is the first video or the first training someone is looking at. So we've covered what you do for a street outreach or path program, and we've covered what we could do for an emergency shelter, hotel, or diversion. Again, double check that entry information and make sure everything is correct. If there is any change from when the client entered the program and the date you're looking at some cleanup, do that interim, update the information in the interim. And then when point in time rolls around, if anything has changed again, or you need to answer those Council of Government questions, do an interim for point in time and update things then. And again, you don't have to wait for point in time to do those Council of Government questions. You can do them whenever. Doesn't matter. Now, let's take a look at those formerly homeless clients, which is permanent housing, permanent supportive housing, and rapid rehousing, right? So we go in and we do the same thing. We double check. And we make sure that all that information is correct as of when they came into the program. And notice the housing move-in date is blank. Remember, housing move-in date is only for these end user 3 programs. So it's permanent housing, permanent supportive, rapid rehousing, because you have to fill this in when they actually lease up / move in, because if you don't, they do not count as being housed, right? Let me repeat that, because this is something that we found when we did point in time last year and the HIC, when we said, do you have all your housing move-in dates in? Do you have all your housing move-in dates in? Do you have all your housing move-in dates in? People were like, yes, yes, yes. And it turned out that right at the deadline, no, they didn't. And so we had to scramble. So this is for your permanent housing, rapid rehousing clients. This is the most important question because if you don't fill this in, your clients don't count as housed, and we can't count them as housed. And if we can't count them as housed, we can't count them as housed in Pitt, we can't count them as housed in HIC, we can't count them as housed when we are doing the LSA, we can't count them when we are doing the NOFO, right? So this is so important, because if we want to show clients are housed, you have to have this filled in. And if they aren't filled in at entry, that's fine. We leave it blank, right? When they enter your program, this should more than likely be blank unless it's a transfer. And if it's a transfer, we want to make sure that we don't keep the old program's housing move-in date in, right? We've got many, many videos on the housing move-in date, and I know I'm preaching again, but we want to make sure that we have it. So for your end user 3 programs, when they first come into the program, this should be blank unless there is a transfer, and then you want to blank it out anyway. You want to make sure that this is blank on the entry screen. Okay, this should be blank on the entry screen. And if there's nothing to change, we just exit out or save and exit. Now, same thing. If there is a change to the client between their start date and whatever date you're doing cleanup, we want to do an interim. In this case, let's say the client got housed today on 12/20, right? We do an interim. We're going to do an add interim. And we would do an interim for the date the housing move-in occurred. We're just saying that it happened today, 12/20. We're moving him in. So now he's officially housed on 12/20. And then if we have answers to those COG questions, we can answer them now. Otherwise, we can wait till point in time, right? So let's say, and we hit save and exit. Now, just a reminder, even if the client is housed the day they come into your program because it's a transfer, that housing move-in date on the entry needs to be blank. And then we would do an interim for the same day, even if they were housed in real life, right? And we would do the housing move-in date then. And just a reminder, because I know this trips up a lot of case managers for permanent housing and rapid rehousing, you don't want to use the previous program's housing move-in date, because that will be before their entry into your program. That'll be a negative number, and the system will automatically flag as an error, and they won't count as housed. If they are housed, however, when they come into the program, you just do an interim, and you would do it for that start date. Why? Because the system is not looking at the entry for housing move-in date. It is looking at an exit object or most recent interim to determine whether they are housed or not. And so we want to just do it, and it sounds silly, but we still want to do an interim just to be safe, even if it's an interim for 12/1 and the project start date is 12/1. In this case, though, he got housed on 12/20, and we filled that in. Please make sure your housing move-in date is filled in for every client that is housed. And that includes the children, that includes the partners, that includes the spouses, that includes the brothers and sisters living with the head of the household. Everyone needs that housing move-in date entered. All right. And I know I'm really, really nagging this like I always do, but you got to get that housing move-in date in. Otherwise, they're not going to count as housed. That's what we've got for you. That's what you have to do for your cleanups. Remember, it is double checking to make sure everything is filled in as of entry and that there are no null values, but make sure that that information is true as of when the client came into the program. If anything has changed between that start date and today when you're doing your cleanup, you're going to do an interim for the date that that change happened and put in that change. And then at point in time, if that's when you want to answer those Council of Government questions, or you notice anything else has changed between your last interim and point in time, do an interim for the night of point in time, 1/25/2023, and fill in those questions. All right. But then there's something else we can all do, and that's run our APR, right? We've got our COC APR. If you have an HMIS account, you can run an APR. And you can see I do lots of APRs almost every day. Every day I'm APRing. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab this one right here. It's our one that's already made. And even though it is live real data, we are not going to look at personally identifiable information. We're just going to run this report. Right? It shows you all the different programs. This is a reporting group that I did, but you'd be running it for each of your programs. I don't advise using a reporting group for your cleanup here before a point in time, because if the client is in multiple programs, like maybe they've gone from shelter to shelter back and forth that you control, right? It's not going to tell you which program the error is in if there is an error. So what I would do is I'd run each of your programs separately and I would do an APR for them. Now, I would do two different APRs. The first APR that I would run would be for 01/01, 2022, or whatever month you want to do. I would do a month. So let's say you want to do it here for December, right? Do it for a full month like you normally do. I know it's not the 23rd yet, but let's just do it. You'd pick your program, HUD if you're a HUD program, PATH if you're a PATH program. And remember, all of our programs are HUD except for those few PATH programs that we have. We build the report and we let it go for a month. And we can ignore the name here because that's not actually what it is. We wait, we wait, we wait. There we go. There's our refresh. And what we're going to do is we're just going to look for any errors. We're going to look for anything that looks right. All right, we've got adults. We've got children. And again, if we take a look, these are all IND programs, which are households without minor children. So my first alert would be, why do we have children in a set of programs that are only for households without minor children? That's my big, hey, we've got an issue here. Another issue is going to be down here where we see number of child or unknown age heads of household, 5, right? So these are two big alerts right here. And if we click on the number, it's going to give us our name and their HMIS ID. I am not clicking on the number because this is a public YouTube video, and that would give you personal identifiable information, and we're not going to do that. But we can go, oh, look, 7 kids, 5 people that are heads of household with unknown age. We got to get those cleaned up. Next section, same thing. Right? Uh-oh. Look at all the people that are missing name data. They have name data issues. Look at that. All those people have social security issues. This needs to be as close to 0 as possible for your program. We will not accept anything in double digits for an error rate. Double digits are not acceptable here in Montgomery County. You must be in single digits for your error rate. And again, we want it to be as close to 0 as possible, especially for point in time. Point in time needs to be as close to 0 as possible. There are exceptions. Maybe you have some undocumented clients that don't have social security numbers. You're going to have an error there. There's no way around that. But we want to try and get 0% errors for point in time. In this, our pre-point in time cleanup, this is a good time to look at all of these errors and get stuff cleaned up. We have 18 veteran errors. We need to get that cleaned up. Relationship to head of household and client location. These are the two most important questions, because if these are not filled in, they are not going to load in a lot of reports correctly. They're not going to count correctly in various reports that we run, and especially client location, because if they don't have that MD601, they're not going to count as a Montgomery County served client. So please, 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 these should always be a 0 rate no matter what. No excuses. So we want to get these cleaned up. So if I'm the case manager, I'm going to start with these, and then I'm going to go up and try and figure out why we've got kids in our program that aren't supposed to have minor children. We've got our income errors. We've got a lot of annual assessment errors for these programs for the month of December, and we've got a lot of chronic. So I would start this cleanup now. Try and get all of your clients done. Get it down to 0% as soon as you can. And just really focus on this section 6. I know that the APR is like 30 pages long, but for you, the case manager, the data entry person, I would just focus on section 5 and the sections marked 6 to make sure that all of that information is correct. If I was doing a permanent housing or rapid rehousing APR, I would have one more thing that I need to check. And let's do a reporting group. All right, let's do all PSH for the same time period. And we're going to let it run. And of course, because it's looking at all PSH for the month so far. Trying to push it through. It is going to take a little bit longer because it's PSH. But as we wait for it, we can go back and talk a little bit more about this. So again, for your emergency shelters, for your street outreach, for your diversion, for your hotels, for your path, you're going to want to run this. And again, you want this to be down to as little errors as possible. We want to have 0%. And again, we have various videos on how to clean up income errors, how to do annual assessment errors, right? So we want to make sure that all of these are cleaned up. Again, look at that 21% we need to get in, and we need to clean up the chronic for all of our emergency shelters without minor children. All right. So the PSH one is run. And again, we do the same thing. If this is PSH IND, but it's not, as you can see, there's our family programs. So it's okay that we have children in here because this is a family group. So yay. But we also don't want children or unknown heads of household in here. 0, that's good to see. Again, we've got errors to clean up. We've got a bunch of Social Security errors, but it's only about 3%, so that's fine. If you notice 3000, we still have some we want to clean up. We do want this to be 0 errors, but this is looking really good. One person is missing the veteran status. We got to get that cleaned up. 21 people missing that relationship to head of household. We absolutely need this to be 0. No client location errors. That's fantastic. Disabling condition. Got to get that cleaned up. And then we can see that we've got those income errors, and we need to have those annual assessment errors. This needs to be 0 as well, because a lot of the reports that are run, say income reports, really make sure that you have those annual assessments, those interims in. So we need to get 525 annual assessments in. All right, we can see a couple clients are missing their chronic homeless questions, but again, 3%. So overall, this is much, much better than the previous report we looked at, except for that annual assessment. Got to get those in. But there's one section that we mentioned that permanent housing, rapid rehousing clients need to look at as well. And that's, again, going back to that housing move-in date. As we can see here, we have 1,943 clients that are in this permanent housing category, but only 1,648 are housed. And what we'd want to do is make sure that that number is correct, because that would imply that about 300 clients do not have housing yet. If that's true, that's fine, but we'd want to click on this and see who is missing their housing and put in that housing move-in date that we may or may not have forgotten. And more than likely, because this is a sticking point here, we do have some clients that need their housing move-in date entered. We can also see it down here for households. We have 1,154 households, but only 995 of them have a housing move-in date. So we want to try and get that housing move-in date for those ones that are supposed to be housed, but we just haven't put it in yet. So for street outreach, shelters, path, diversion, you're going to want to look at section 5 and section 6. And for permanent housing, rapid housing, permanent supportive housing, you're going to want to look at 5, 6, and then you're going to also want to look at 7A and 8A, and those are the areas you're going to want to do cleanup on. That's all I've got for you today. Remember, anyone with an HMIS account can run the APR. If you're not sure how to do it, we have a video, a 60-minute long video that covers the entire APR from beginning to end, but we also have a PowerPoint that you can read. So if you're not sure what to do for providers or what's a reporting group or anything like that, we cover it in that. Again, this video assumes you know all this already because this is our point in time video. But I did want to repeat all that housing move-in date stuff as if it was the first time we covered it, because there still are a lot of people that are not filling in the housing move-in date. This is all I've got for you today. Hopefully you found this helpful. This video should cover all the things that you can do before point in time, which is great, because if you get a lot of stuff done before point in time, you don't have to worry about it at point in time feeling like that you're behind the 8 ball and that you've got all this pressure to get all this stuff in a very small amount of time before that first due date. Again, Street outreach is going to have the hardest time because you don't know who you're going to encounter on point in time. Emergency shelters, a little bit easier because some of those clients are going to be there on point in time, whereas some are going to come in the night of point in time for the first time or that haven't been there for a while. For permanent housing and rapid rehousing, you know who your clients are. It's very unlikely that you're going to have a new client on point in time. So you can get all this done way ahead of time. You can get all that information cleared up. You can get those Council of Government questions entered, and then you really have nothing to do for point in time. So there's no excuse to not be like 100% done by the 27th for those permanent housing or rapid rehousing programs, because you've got all this time and you can start it now. And there's very little variance between now and actual January 25th, which is point in time. Again, that's all I've got for you today. If you have any questions, I'm always an email away. And we can reach out and do personalized trainings for your agency or program if they have any questions. This video is just meant to help you, and I hope that you got something out of it. There will be a part 2, which is just for agency administrators, showing them various reports that they can run in SAP Business Objects to help with the data cleanup. And I hope that I'll see you in that video next. Have a great day.